phase one was getting an Iraqi government that was inclusive and credible, and we now have done that. And so now what we've done is, rather than just try to halt ISIL's momentum, we're now in a position to start going on some offense. The airstrikes have been very effective in degrading ISIL's capabilities and slowing the advance that they were making. Now what we need is ground troops, Iraqi ground troops, that can start pushing them back.
There is no reason to raise an eyebrow when the president claims his latest war policy is not failing. Any president in his position would likely say exactly the same thing. But the president's razor-thin definition of war is once again on display. And when will he and his followers be forced to admit the hard truth about a never-ending war and the multitude of mistakes that seem to just be piling up? Let's welcome to MidPoint from the Foreign Policy Research Institute, where he is co-chair of the Center for the Study of Terrorism. He served in the U.S. intelligence community during the Reagan administration and the Anti-Terror Advisory Committee during the George W. Bush administration. Edward Turzanski. Mr. Turzanski, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
When you hear the president's statement made on Sunday on Face the Nation, do you buy it?
No, I don't. And I think the problem is, first of all, let's keep in mind that the president originally wanted the authorization to use military force to be repealed. Now he tells us that under the guise of that law, he is going to commit 1,500 troops. He's not telling us exactly what they're going to do. And somehow we're supposed to believe or take him at his word that things are going better. These 1,500 troops, who will not serve in a combat position, but will be advisors, are going to make the difference. I have to tell you, not just Republicans, but also Democrats in Congress have very strong questions they want to put to the administration, which is why we ought to have a debate in Congress about a new authorization to use force.
Does not the debate need to include the actual legality of war itself? Because if you take the president's definition of combat, advisors can be sent to the front lines alongside the troops and could even call in airstrikes without directly engaging the enemy, but they are armed and they can defend themselves. This is a definition that virtually every military expert that I and everybody else has spoken to completely rejects, correct?
Well, yes, you've pointed to what I think is the crux of the matter domestically. Now, the president does have very wide latitude within the Constitution to commit military force, but we also have the War Powers Act and the simple fact that Congress has to declare war. The Constitution is silent on what form that takes. For George Bush, the authorization to use military force fit the bill. The conditions have changed, and we need the vigorous debate to know exactly what the president's putting us into, because Congress has the obligation and the public has a right to find out what the mission is, what we're going to do.
In your opinion, would the United States people themselves actually consider, and this is something that we need to put into the proper context here, because what we're talking about here is a narrow definition of war. I want to make this clear to everybody here because it's exactly what part of the point is that we're talking about, that narrow definition of war. If indeed they were to go to the Congress and ask for the declaration of war, and it actually would be allowed at that point, it would be passed. Do you think the American people would stand for that, though, knowing that they would be right back in the thick of things?
Well, Ed, that's a good question, and let's keep this in mind. We're in this situation right now because 2 Americans were beheaded by ISIS. The public opinion coming out of those 2 beheadings turned in a fortnight. In a 2-week period, the American public went from saying, stay out of there, to saying someone's got to do something about this, and we're the only ones. But again, that's why we ought to have the vigorous debate in Congress. You had it during the Bush administration leading up to the Iraq War. It would be a tremendous mistake for the country and also for the president not to have that same debate now, because the public either comes along or you find out that the public is strongly opposed, and then you have to figure out what you're going to do next.
Mr. Turzanski, please stand by a moment. After the break, We'll talk more. How does America get itself out of this battle box the current administration has placed us in? And when do we reach the stage of battle fatigue for soldiers who are receiving no break whatsoever? And at 51 minutes after the hour, one president and one historic phrase that must speak to the current battle against dictators of all types. That's in Telling It Like It Is. That and so much more right here on the Monday edition of MidPoint, where every day we question everything.